The bill on the agenda is House File 2780, and Representative Quam moves House File 2780 be approved and recommended to the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform. Representative Quam, could you please give a brief description of your bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this bill came about because of attending a meeting that the department and child care providers were at. I've actually been attending those for years, and so it comes from several. But there's a lot of confusion and consternation around the changes. And so the first part of it, I had several daycare providers say, the cost of repetitively doing the background checks. If I have someone that's a junior or senior in high school, I don't want to turn right around and pay again. And they asked, can you have the option to choose that if you have an older child, that then you can opt in for the 5-year, background. And I said, because it's optional and doesn't force anyone to make that decision, I have no problem with including that in the bill. The second section, it became evident that there's not a notification that, they say we're going to destroy this biometric data and we're not going to keep it. But I asked, do you notify? And they said no. And I thought, well, when you notify you pass your background check, you should give notification that you followed through and destroyed it. And then the third section, direct the commissioner for a unified background. Frankly, if we have people that are working with our children, then we ought to have consistency. And by doing this, we have people that maybe are substitute teachers at a school. They subbed to give daycare providers vacation. And by having it unified, then they go through the process once because it's up at the state level. The entities can call and is there an active background check and that they passed, and they can say yes. And it saves repetitive cost, time, and hassle. And so this is to try and see how we could implement that. It's not really changing the status quo yet, but let's look at doing it smarter. And that's, a summary of the bill.
Thank you, Representative Quam. I understand that there's some testifiers on this bill. All right, Ms. Seidel, would you please make your way up to the testifying stand? And if there's anyone else that wishes to testify on the bill, please come forward as well. Thank you. Ms. Seidel, please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Julie Seidel, and I'm the Public Policy Director for MACCP, and also I've been a child care provider in Anoka County for 15 years. House File 2780, in the current way it's written, we cannot support this bill. With some amendments to address our concerns, we could offer our support here. We appreciate Representative Quam's attention to the matter of disclosure. To date, we have been unsuccessful obtaining full disclosure regarding regarding the enhanced fingerprint background studies. However, the current language gives child care providers a false sense of security as it assures them their prints will not be retained by DHS, the BCA, or DPS, but does not require DHS to disclose that our prints will be retained by the FBI. We have offered some proposed amendments and thank Representative Quam for his willingness to work through language with us to ensure full disclosure regarding how prints will be used, who will have access to our data, and where they will be retained. We've also offered a proposed amendment that would require the BCA to request removal of our prints from the FBI's NGI database once we no longer are subjected to background studies. It is our understanding that without this request made by the BCA, our prints will be retained until we're 110 or been dead for 7 years and stored in the same database as convicted criminals. It's also important to us that parents receive this full disclosure prior to deciding whether or not their children should be subjected to these invasive fingerprint studies. So we have offered possible amendment for requiring this. Last, while we don't have language to propose at this time, we do have concerns that if fingerprint background studies are an option, DHS or county licensors will pressure providers to choose this or fail to mention it's optional, resulting in children being subjected to fingerprinting by default. We look forward to working with Representative Quam and DHS on this language so that we can protect the rights of our children and providers.
Thank you, Ms. Seidel, for your thoughts on this issue. It's probably the number one issue that I've heard since session adjourned last year, so thank you. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. You should see in your packet amendment draft being considered because it did not, I didn't receive this in time, and we weren't able to get it available in time. It's not before this committee, but would now be available. And this is the language that was came to us to try and cover that notification. You know, and you can read through the proposed language, and so there will be an amendment to address this concern at the main committee.
All right, Representative Quam. Members, is there any discussion? All right. Any final comments, Representative Quam, or was that it?
Madam Chair, just to sum up, that all of this came from daycare providers at a public meeting that came forward.
All right, well, thank you, child care providers, for bringing forward your thoughts. Representative Quam renews his motion that House File 2780 be approved and recommended to the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion prevails. House File 2780 is approved and recommended to the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform.